10th, 2020. I'll call to order this meeting of the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen. A couple notices I just have to go over, but before we start the meeting, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting may be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford telemedia website, www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Thanks for letting me read that. And a note to everybody that is on the call in the room, any messages that go into the general chat area or privately between members are part of the public record. So just keep that in mind. We ask when you're not talking, if you can mute your microphone just to cut out the background noise. And if you're going to be moving around and live on your camera, maybe you could shut the camera off just to help everybody with their screens. All right, it looks like Paul is in the waiting room. He's coming in now.
Okay.
But
for the poll petition?
No, I'm sorry, Paul. Paul Cohen, town manager. So you just hold on. I'll call you up when we're ready.
There was a note on the screen earlier, excuse me, Ken, there was a note on the screen that Paul was having a hard time getting into the meeting.
I get it.
Okay.
So why don't we start with open session? Is there anybody that would like to speak to the board in open session? Even if you would like to speak to the board, you can type something in the chat room to unmute if you can't unmute yourself. But I don't see anybody. If someone pops up, we'll come back. But there's no chat and nobody raising hands. So with that, we'll go to Virginia. Virginia, can you do the committee vacancies, please?
Yep. So these are the committee vacancies as of today. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 2 openings. The Board of Appeals has 1 vacancy. The CCA Advisory Committee has 3 vacancies. The Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 2 vacancies. The Commission on Disabilities has 2 vacancies. The Community Action Program Committee has 1 vacancy. The Community Preservation Fund Committee has 1 vacancy. The Council on Aging has 5 associate member positions. The Energy Conservation Committee has 3 vacancies. The Historic District Commission has 1 vacancy. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 1 vacancy. The Middlesex Canal Commission has 2. The Parade Committee accepts all applications. The Permanent Building Committee has 1 vacancy. The Personnel Board has 1 vacancy. The Public Celebrations Committee has 5. The Recycling Committee has 3 vacancies. The Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 1 vacancy. And the Tree Committee has 3 vacancies. And the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee has 2 vacancies. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, you can find the application on the town website or call the town manager's office at 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Virginia. And so with that, Paul Pellegrini, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm going to unmute you and have you come into the room and talk to us about the poll petition that is coming forward tonight. Here you go.
Yeah, okay.
All right, Paul. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Good evening, Council. My name is Paul Pellegrini. I'm an engineer for North National Grid in the Merrimack Valley, and we're here to request permission from the town to install a pole to serve solar panels for the UPS distribution center on Brick Hill Road. They've completely solar paneled their warehouse, and there's a considerable amount of power that's going to be generated and being will be able to be put back into the system, and consequently lower our energy costs by solar addition to the grid. So to that end, we need. I met with the outside crews. I'm like I said, an engineer. The outside crews who are actually going to construct it, and they need an additional pole at the entrance there into the UPS facility.
Okay, so does anybody on the board have any questions? No questions. All right, does anybody from the public have any questions? Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box here.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Paul Pellegrini, you said something about solar? I wasn't tracking.
Yeah. Yes. The pole that we're requesting permission from the town to install is to support new electric lines into the UPS warehouse that has completely installed solar panels on their roof. So
Okay.
new lines have to be installed to carry the new current and to be put into the electric grid in Chelmsford.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the poll petition for Brick Hill Road. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Emily?
She can't unmute
Hold on.
herself.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to. There we go.
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. So 5-1. Congratulations, Paul.
Thank
No,
you,
that
Counselor.
was just closing the public hearing, Ken. We haven't
Oh, I'm
voted.
sorry. I'm sorry. Right. Jumping around here.
Okay.
So do we have another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the poll petition for Brick Kiln Road as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Now, congratulations, Paul.
Thank you, Counselors. Good night.
Have a good night. That brings us to item 5.
Four.
Or is it so long?
4.
No, 4 was our Brick Hill Road poll hearing, right?
Change of hearing. This is the change of, the one I got is next to the alcoholic beverage.
Okay, so that's, we'll go to the next one. Yeah, that's, anyways. So change of manager for the all alcoholic beverages, the Indian palette. So we will bring him in and unmute.
Yes, Indian palette. Hi, this is Sridhar Bogali. I'm from Indian Palette Inc. Madras Grill. I applied for the change of license manager for the license.
Great. Good evening,
Great.
everybody. Angelique Eliopoulos here from the offices of Eliopoulos and Eliopoulos at 9 North Road, here on behalf of the applicant for a change of manager on an all alcoholic beverages license for the Indian Palette, doing business as Madras Grill at 7 Summer Street, coming to you live from my basement where I'm hiding from my children. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'm not good at the backgrounds, but hopefully you see me okay and hear me okay. As we said, we're here just for the transfer of a change of manager. Everything else on the license will remain the same. Ms. Velchala has done a wonderful job, but it was always the intention for Shashi Bogelli to, once his citizenship was finalized, to take over as the manager. He's been a principal the whole time. He's been there the whole time. He's there probably the most. Shashi, I'll let you chime in about that. They're full-time tip certified. And so he's looking to just take over as the manager. Again, everything else would stay the same. And I believe you have everything in the application, but of course he's here to answer any questions you might have. I believe all the boards have signed off as well.
Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? I don't.
May I jump in and just
So
make
do we
one
go to-
more request as you consider it? I don't know if because this didn't have a notice if you typically do the 2-week holdover, but we would request from the board that you vote today not do the 2-week holdover if that's part of your just because again the company and the restaurant have been in existence and for the change of manager. But again, I'm not even sure if that's your practice for the change of manager.
Any discussion on that, or we?
It typically is not for a change of manager. We usually don't do the holdover, especially given that it's a person that's basically been the owner, as you said.
Right. Thank you. I wasn't sure.
So do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to accept the application for a change of manager on the all alcoholic beverages restaurant license for the Indian Palace Inc., doing business as Madras Grill, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Thanks. Good luck.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, item 6, I'll turn it over to you, Paul, for the purchase of the 54 acres of Warren Pole property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board may recall, at your last meeting, you signed the warrant for a special town meeting for 2 weeks from tonight, 3 weeks from tonight on August 24th, regarding the town's purchase of the Warren Pole property. I'm sorry, 2 weeks from tonight, today's the 10th. Since that time, the Community Preservation Committee met. They reviewed the 2 appraisals that they had commissioned for the property. Our town council, Paul Haverty, and the seller's council reviewed a purchase and sale agreement document, which is before you this evening. They're in agreement on the language, and the sellers and the Community Preservation Commission are in agreement on the acquisition price, which is $1,150,000. It's in summary, it's the average of the 2 independent appraisals that were conducted for the property, and then what will happen this evening, the sellers have already signed this agreement. Upon your approval of this agreement, it will then advance to town meeting in 2 weeks following the Finance Committee's hearing, and then you'll consider your recommendation next Monday evening at your meeting. So again, everything is in concert in terms of the documents and price and process moving forward.
Paul, could you just say a little bit more about how the town is going to fund this?
Sure.
The
Yeah, the town meeting will be asked to fund it from Community Preservation Fund, and that will be a borrowing of debt service for a 10-year period from the Community Preservation Fund. The Community Preservation Fund has the capacity to take on what will be 10 years of level principal payments plus interest. And the reason for that is this year is the last year of the debt service for the 2 town hall projects that began a decade ago. So there'll be no impact in terms of the existing tax levy. Again, it's not money that can be used otherwise. It's restricted to the Community Preservation Fund surcharge. So again, everything is in alignment by the Community Preservation Fund committee, and again, moving towards town meeting.
And
would there be a-
Darlene, I'm sorry, Darlene Lucier and John
Go ahead.
Sousa have reviewed it.
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Darlene's reviewed and provided the report to the Community Preservation Committee, much like you've seen at the town meeting in June, of the debt service by the committee. They have available funds and capacity to take on this project. John Sousa worked with the town's bond counsel and our financial advisors to develop a debt schedule that is conservative. It assumes a 2% interest rate, which when the town borrows, we borrow tax exempt, and those rates are less than 2% at this period in time. So again, you'll have a level payment of $115,000 per year, and then you'll pay down the interest amount will get paid on the remaining principal every year. So the highest debt period is the first year, and then it decreases down till the final year. So again, everything is involved and included, and again, online for town meeting.
Thank you.
Paul, would there be a chance to, I know Phil Stanway was doing tours of the property, but maybe for town meeting reps to go and see the property somehow? I've been asked by 3 of them so far.
Yes,
they weren't.
The sellers have made that option available. If you can suggest maybe that we can do it the Saturday before town meeting, so there's advance notice, we could set a time, and then people could go out and meet on the site as took place 2 months ago now, and then we could could allow that for people who wish to see the property. As you know,
arrange that.
Yeah, Phil Stanway has made numerous photos and posted them, but you're right, we can do an in-person tour.
I was asked if the board could amend it so that it was under a deed restriction. Will it end up under a deed restriction as it's currently being done?
It's required by law. The Community Preservation Act requires that any property that's
what I thought.
So it will be obviously the ones the towns have acquired, and Sheehan Farm, the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust holds those restrictions. So the Community Preservation Committee has put in funding to prepare that deed restriction, as well as the baseline survey, which is basically a comprehensive assessment of the property in its state today, which is done with a perimeter survey and photos and recording. Those have been done in the past by the Audubon Society, and I would imagine that would take place again on this property. So yes, that will be involved because it's required to be involved under the community preservation law.
And when it's done, who will hold the deed on this?
The town of Chelmsford will hold the deed. Barring the unforeseen, the Chelmsford Land Conservation Trust would hold the preservation restriction. And let me give you an example of how that works. Like today, we hold the deed for Sunny Meadow Farm, off of Robin Hill Road and Acton Road. The fellow who does the farming there, the organic farming there with the leaf growing and so forth, he had approached the town about subleasing a portion of that land for wood chopping and sale, and basically both the land trust and me as the agent for the town responded to that saying that's not permissible under the preservation restriction for the property. So basically you've got 2 independent eyes on the property, of which the land trust has the enforcement provision, and obviously the town is the owner of the property. So that's how it works. You have a third party who enforces that the land remains in its preserved state.
In this town meeting, this is in essence, this is the vote for the CPC to spend the money?
Yes, this is the authorization for the expenditure of community preservation funds, and authorizes the Board of Selectmen to execute the deed and recording and all other related work, to transfer a title to the town of Chelmsford.
Okay, great.
Well, I have a couple questions. So has the deposit been paid to the seller?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, and when would that happen? After town meeting?
Yes, we would do that after town meeting and prior to closing.
Okay.
Because we have to have appropriation to do that.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure, because I mean, I don't expect it to be an issue, but just in case it did not pass town meeting, then they would be entitled to keep that deposit, correct?
Right. And there is not a long, unlike a traditional home closing, there is not a long period between the town meeting and the closing. So that may even be brought in again, but it certainly would be certainly no later than the beginning of October.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Paul. We need to vote.
I'll make a motion to approve and sign the purchase and sale agreement for the 54-acre Warren Pole property at 95 Boston Road as presented.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor by roll call, Pat?
Aye.
Emily? There you go, Emily. Thank you. George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Paul, do you need us to come in and actually sign that?
No, we can do the electronic signatures as we have in the past.
Okay. All right, that brings us to item, thank you again, Paul. Item 7, the diversity, racial equality, and inclusion. Does anybody want to start the discussion? I'll give a little background. I think what we agreed on at our previous meetings that we would all come back with our takeaways from that meeting. And one of the things we did when we did the previous listening session is the goals were broken out in short, medium, and long-term goals. The different departments got involved as needed to solve those problems. And I thought that would probably work the same here. And with that, I don't know if anybody has any comments or input.
Yeah, I have a few comments. I don't know if the way that we did the traffic thing really translates well to this. I mean, it's not like we're going to put up stop signs and it's going to, solve the problem. I think this is something that's going to be ongoing, and I think it is important that we take it very seriously. As I mentioned a few meetings ago, MMA has joined a partnership with the National League of Cities to come up with a program for diversity, equity, and race equity and inclusion is what they call it. They have a lot of resources on the MMA website and on the National League of Cities website, including a municipal action guide, which lists 6 steps to possibly go through, starting with the leadership, that being us, setting an example in tone, and observing and listening, making a public declaration, which I think is important. Setting up a team to follow issues that arise, and coming up with some ideas to put into a policy, and then create a plan, as you said, Ken, to have goals and objectives and some kind of timeline, although I don't imagine that this is going to be something that we're going to have a point at which we'll say, we're all done now, we've done it. I mean, I think it's going to be something that's very much continuous and difficult, quite frankly, very difficult. Because, you read these stories about, phrases that you use that really are offensive to certain people, depending on how you say them and when you say them. And I'm sure we've all been guilty of doing that at some point, whether it's, maybe not during meetings, but in our, private conversations with people. And I think we really need to become more aware of that. So I think it's going to be one of those things that we have to be continually reminded about it.
Any specific ideas of things we can?
Somebody had suggested putting together a diversity committee. I think that's not a bad idea, although, Paul, you might have some thoughts on this. I mean, we do have a personnel board. I don't know if the responsibility like this would fall to them, if we would, maybe not.
Yeah, I would think not. I would think that you should create a special committee in a larger committee. I mean, my sense is probably talking a 9-person committee to take on this challenge. which may include members of the Board of Selectmen, administration of the town, and the general public.
And the school committee probably, right? No? Schools, Paul?
They're up to their elbows in their own committees and their own efforts. I don't know that you can. I don't know that you can bring them in because it may dilute what they're trying to do. And so it, like most things, we tend to operate concurrent but yet separate from the school department because they have a tremendous challenge. And if you recall from our hearing, a lot of the concerns that were raised pertain to education.
That's why I brought it up, because it did seem like a lot of the problems of people complaints were from students, you know what I mean? And bullying and
You're right. So I think that part of that was because the group that really pushed and got this discussion going was recent graduates and current students. But I think what we're all missing is the repeated examples of racism at the adult level. You had a situation around the chickens where there was a question of whether or not there were racist comments being made, whether intentional or unintentional. You had, there have been a couple of examples. I hear from a couple of people on a regular basis about examples of racism. The fact that it took until this long to get that thin blue line flag on the canine vehicle removed, the implications of that flag in particular with its background and with the way it was twisted from whatever benevolent origin story it might have had to be put on a canine vehicle of all things. I mean, it's a lot. And I know that there were a lot of emails about that. And then, we have this thing where recently we're part of an organization called NEMLAC. It took until 2014 for NEMLAC to actually get around to pretending to review its mission statement and take mention of the Vietnam War, interstate highway development, and the civil rights movement off of its website. So not only did they not touch their mission statement after the Vietnam War ended and after the interstate highways was built, but they put that garbage on the web. So they have done no self-reflection in a public-facing way, no self-reflection, no change, no examination, and no organization that doesn't review its mission statement on a regular basis is remotely functional. That is a useless thing to pretend you have if you are not reviewing it. And that is another area where the schools review mission statements on a regular basis. And I have interviewed at schools that were in the process of rewriting their mission statement because they went through and they looked at it and said, you know what? This doesn't match us anymore. And so for an organization that we pay money to be a part of, to have still been referencing the Vietnam War as of 6 years ago, and then to sit there and pretend like, oh, no, it's fine. It's totally changed from now. I don't believe it. So what I want to see, and what I keep hearing over and over again, is that we need to teach anti-racism. You need to make explicitly anti-racist statements. You need to have anti-racism built into your mission statements. You need to have it built into your language. You need to be able to call out people when they are being racist. You need to be able to call out all of those things that, we hear. Ice cream truck went by. I neglected to, I couldn't hear whether or not it's got, Turkey in the Hay playing, but that's another example of even music history going back to minstrelsy. I don't know how much music history is taught these days, but we have a pretty good band program, so we might know more than some other areas. I think that there are broader educational opportunities to be had at a professional development level in the town. I think that professional development is as useful as you want to make it. I know that as a teacher, a lot of it's centered around those ridiculous standardized tests and all the useless things that we had to do with them, and was very rarely functional, and very rarely felt like super productive. It was mainly like nitpicking around standardized test schedules. And so I don't know what professional development looks like in other realms. I do know that, having recently gone through HR training, where I had to watch videos about how not to sexually harass and how to speak up when somebody is sexually harassing someone else, and how to identify racism in the workplace and how to actively avoid being racist in the workplace. There are training videos that are current that do call out some of the things that we, especially in lily white New England, with our, Vietnam War protesting police organization, we specifically said we want to maintain the quaint character of New England towns. We all know what that means. So I wonder what municipal human resources training looks like, and whether or not we're actually discussing such phrases around that. Today, we had a letter about the pride flag being displayed at the community outreach coordinator's office. So for somebody trying to outreach to the entire community, she was told she had to take that down because being expressly not bigoted is apparently a political statement. That I found appalling. I don't see how that applies. I think our flag statement is ridiculous, and that was how that was applied. That, our community services coordinator, who, if you look at any measure of any statistics, you have the LGBTQIA community who is disproportionately affected by things like lack of healthcare access, lack of housing, lack of fair pay, lack of fair wages, lack of retirement funds, pensions, all those things. And so for our community resources coordinator, our community services coordinator to have a flag indicating that she is welcoming and accepting of all, and for somebody to email in and complain that that's a political statement, yeah, it is, because we need to serve everybody and we need to focus our community resources on the people who need it most. Those are the people who need to feel comfortable walking in and know that they are not going to be discriminated against, that they are not going to be shut down and put back in a corner or left out on the street homeless. Like that is exactly where that sort of thing needs to be. So, I mean, I see regular examples. Even when you have, recently there's been a Facebook group dedicated to social justice, but even there you have God, it's like a meme. It's like a living meme. You have people coming in who are white middle-aged men going, do you guys think the Black Lives Matter messaging and branding could be changed to be more palatable?
Emily?
Tone police yourselves.
Is this, you want to volunteer as the chairman for that committee, Emily?
I still have comments.
Yeah, Virginia, you're next up because I think you're the last one and then I'll go.
I don't think George has said anything either.
I'm sorry?
Do you have any comments, George?
Well,
No.
George, you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Never mind.
So I went back and reviewed the listening session that we had and reviewed some other materials that I just have related to my profession. And what I heard come out of the listening session, I put into 3 buckets. One was the schools, and I know that they have a number of ongoing committees and discussions happening. The schools was related to teachers and mentors as well as curriculum and other things. And so while I agree that I don't think we should try to jump in and help them solve that because they have many experts already working it, when we do set up a committee, I think we should leave it their option as to whether they want someone representative of the school system on that. The second bucket that I noted was our town government. These were comments related to the demographics of our employees, our town meeting members, our other elected and appointed officials. Someone raised something about the hiring process, and do we do we tend to, handpick people, or do we actively go out and try to open up that recruiting process in a way that would reach more people, to have a more diverse pool to choose from? I think the big thing on there, to Pat's point and to Emily's point, it was training. And then there was also a comment about helping the community or segments of the community feel more comfortable with the relationships with the police department. And it was not a dig at the police department. It was a person just commenting, a couple people saying, gee, it would be really nice if we could have some open discussions so that we could feel more comfortable in our community. I really like the idea of exploring what Pat said about the MMA training and steps that are available for municipalities, and looking at that at a deeper level. I think that, if we had our elected and our appointed and our employees even just do like a couple hours of training, that would go a long way to raise awareness. So that, I'm sorry that I got off track. The 3 buckets I had were the schools, the town government, and then the other comments I heard, and I think this is part of what Emily might also be getting at, is just a general comment, the general population, the general culture of the town. And when you talk about diversity, it's about really understanding, valuating, and celebrating the uniquenesses of individuals, whether that's related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic. And I think when you talk about culture, a lot of that breaks down to values. And so we just went through a vision and values committee, and we have a recommendation that came forward. I think one of the things we might want to look at is, how do we instill those values deeper into the community, whether it becomes part of something you sign a sheet when you join a committee. Do the values become part of that piece of paper that you sign? How do we help the general education in the community? And some of that may be better answered by a committee, or may better be informed by us looking at what these MMA tools are and experiencing some of that. There was also, I'd like to point out, there was an individual who volunteered that she would be interested in participating, and she does this diversity training and awareness as a day job for corporations. And whether her or someone else, I think that might be worth considering. I think it would at least be worth considering getting someone like that on this committee when we define it. And the last note that I made, Paul made the point earlier, I think that we have to figure out what kind of representation we want on this committee. And I would prefer not to limit it to the standard paradigm that says if you have more than 5 to 7 members, it's too big. I think this may need to be bigger to encompass, different representation across the community, or maybe there's a committee and a couple of subcommittees. I don't really know what that looks like, but I think it's really important as we think about what we implement, that we're not inadvertently restricting getting the different perspectives into this committee, however it's implemented. So that was my thought. Schools, let it be the schools that run it, invite them to participate. The town government, I think a lot of that came down to training, awareness, and hiring. And then in general, it's the community culture, and how do we help build that awareness and respect throughout the community culture. Ken, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know why I keep doing that. So if you don't mind, I'll go next. After I went through and rewatched the previous meeting, I ended up sort of with 4 buckets or topics, and they've been summarized so far by everybody. So I had the town administration, elected officials, the police station as a separate entity, the schools, and then community at large were the 4 areas that I heard everybody sort of speak to. And one comment I might make as far as, the schools stand on their own, let them do what they're going to do. I'm Dr. Lang was on the call. We had some school committee members on the call. They took notes. I've spoken to some of them. They're working on their parts. Maybe we could have a liaison to whatever committee they set up, and that liaison goes between the two, and that way we're not duplicating efforts. And listen to the comments about the police. I spoke to Chief Spinney and to see if it was even feasible, but maybe a meet the police day where the police station's open down back. And if you have children who are afraid of the police or want to learn what the police are, what they're about, or even just to meet them so that the police are familiar with who they are and they can feel comfortable to know that the police know them and they know the police and they can go to the police and not hide from them. Maybe that comes out of the committee. One of the ideas that I was wondering about with the school department that I brought up with Donna Newcomb was if there was a way to do a teacher swap. Go to maybe into Boston or to another community and swap teachers with different backgrounds to come and teach for a month in Chelmsford while our teacher goes there. And that way the teacher gets a look into the lives there and the teachers get to come here and get a look into the lives here and we all learn from it. I checked out the MMA website that Mike McCall sent the information over to us, and I agree with Pat. I think there's a lot of resources there that we can use in town hall to help us on that end. And then along with that, the training, I think it's key that we have the elected officials do the training just as much as the administration in town hall. And I think with that, and I think that all can be achieved through that committee. So I'm glad everybody gave the feedback they gave tonight, because I think we hit so many different nails on the head here. And now the question is, and we've sort of addressed it, how big should the committee be? And do we want to establish one? And should we put it out and start accepting applications?
I would think the HR person would be very instrumental. It would be important to that. You know what I mean? She's involved with all the employees, so if there's something to be discussed, get it out there. Just a thought.
Yep. Paul, your thoughts?
Well, I'm nervous when I hear the word instill, because if you step back and hear the premise is that the town is not representative of the diverse community that we have. So I would think rather than coming in and being top down, I think the board should form a committee and let the committee decide how they're going to go about it and what target areas they are. I mean, to draw a parallel, if we were going to ask for reform in communist China, we wouldn't expect the communist Chinese party to lead the reform effort. And so if you step back from it, I think what we ought to do is form the committee, whether it's 9 people, 11, what have you, and have representatives from the town government, whether it be 2 members of the Board of Selectmen or other elected officials, administration, whatever. But rather than coming in and saying, these are the areas and these are what we want you to do, I think you form the committee, and then the Board of Selectmen in the administration, if they participate as participating members, let that committee guide and direct and steer where it's going, as opposed to, and I'm not trying to read too much into it, as opposed to us sort of saying, well, these are the target areas, these are the target. I mean, I just think that you're almost sort of flawed, because if the premise is that we're not representative, then why would you have a non-representative group be providing the guidance for the diversity committee? So my sense would be is the information is out there, the video's out there, the information, but form the committee and then let the committee steer which way it's going, and they can come back to the board and say, we want a professional facilitator, we want this, we want to involve the HR, we want to involve this, we want to deal with the police in this area, we want to deal with this. But I just think that my concern is starting out that we ought not to prescribe too much, that I think it ought to be directed by a diverse group which is independent of the town, and then let them come in and we provide the resources and some participation, but let them steer a course. Because I think that way it gives more authenticity to what we're trying to do, rather than saying, this is what we want you to do as a committee. And so that's my concern. And because, I think as we all touched upon, I heard 5 different speakers touch upon a whole broad spectrum of areas, but I'd like the committee to identify priorities and target areas and resources that are needed. And obviously there's going to be funding needed, and we can go to the town meeting and get that. But I think we ought to let it, be driven by the grassroots and by the community. I'm very nervous about the town sort of being the patriarch, for lack of a terrible word to use, of this effort.
I think what Paul has said makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think the town's quite as bad as we're all making it out to be. I know there are examples, but things that have to be straightened out. I mean, I've lived in town an awful long time, and I never really found it to be that bad a town to live in, to be truthful with you. But maybe I'm just lucky.
I do think at a certain point that, asking magical BIPOC people to come in and explain to us what we're doing wrong when the information is out there. I see that, you don't want to dictate top down, but frankly, when do we ever do any lifting? When do we actually say, yes, I have done these things. I have made mistakes. I've attempted to learn from them. How can I help my fellow pasty, WASPy, Anglo-Saxons and French whatevers?
Emily, I'm going to ask that you stop making disparaging remarks about anybody. This is not a place for it.
Okay, but how do we honestly talk about the fact that the problem is with suburban white people, and that is the problem? When do we actually say it's us? And when do we say we need to recognize that? We need to do some self-examination. We need to actually direct ourselves and use the information that's out there, rather than asking for people to come in and explain it again to us.
But Emily, I think what Virginia's saying is you can say what you just said without saying the word WASP or WASPy or pasty white.
That's the problem, though. There's a very clear problem group. So at what point do you look around and say, problem area? Rather than beating around the bush and making sure everyone feels petted and everyone's always coddled. At a certain point, we just need to say, right, I'm owning this. This is a problem. This is exactly what the problem is. I
think we are owning it. We had the listening session, and now.
What would you like me to use? Give me a list of vocabulary words that I am allowed to use, so that I can.
So Emily, that's part of what we're talking about with the education component.
Okay, so we want people of color to come in and say, "Hi, guys."
No.
This is what are we asking them? When do we actually do some work?
If somebody asked me tomorrow to take, I don't know, let me just use the MMA training as an example, okay? If that's been vetted, scrubbed, and I don't know what's in it, but if there was something identified tomorrow that I needed to go take to raise my own awareness and help promulgate a culture that respects diversity in this community, sign me up. I don't think anybody here is saying it is not owning this. I think what we're saying is, if we're going to put a committee together, perhaps we should not dictate to that committee from the outset what its mission and what its output needs to be, but let them meet and come back and tell us and maybe we participate in that committee. I don't know what the committee looks like yet, but I don't feel that sitting here making gross generalizations about the population is any more productive than not doing anything with the outcome of the listening session. And I personally don't feel that that's how we should be speaking about people. It's no better than speaking about other pockets of the population in a disparaging manner. If there's an issue, and there have been plenty of people who have come forward and said, I realize now, I've been made aware of my own shortcomings and where I need to be educated in this area. And I respect that a lot. And I think that we need to acknowledge that and not just start making these disparaging gross generalizations about the population of Chelmsford. I take huge issue with that, and I'm tired of it. Let's get more constructive and figure out how to address the issue and how to we had an hour and 22 minutes of extremely valuable input from people. And I'd like to take it from the standpoint of what do we do with it, not how do we use it to bash people on the head. You're not going to get results from people by criticizing them. You get results from people by having conversations and having the difficult conversations, which is what we're trying to do. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I'm just.
So what my concern is that nobody has said these are the hard parameters. I think asked what we heard, and so we said what we heard. We said what we've heard from people who actually call us to complain. And so nobody has said these are the limits of this committee.
Okay, so let's have that conversation instead of making it about what's wrong with everybody. What do you want to get at with what are the limits of the committee? Can you help me understand that better?
I don't see where there are limits. I see where you've started a couple of topics, and then rather than having these committees where you're always like, but this is our charter, you will allow them to have some growth and some organic growth, so they're not so constricted all the time by these utterly painful rules. Like, you have to acknowledge that you are not going to see everything that they are going to discuss. And so you have, it's not going to be a narrow focus, one issue. We need to look at, Rule 11, subsection C, clause A, where you're just examining the 3 letters in the middle of the word and whether or not the comma was misplaced. Like, it's not a narrow focus, it's a broad focus. Here are the things we've heard. So what else? Like, you can have the final part be, and what else? Like, it's not, nobody has said that these are the parameters under which you must work, except that the parameters are the town of Chelmsford and the amazingly problematic face we put out there to the world. And if we're gonna ask about what we can do as a town, I think that we should be looking at where we post information about what goes on in the town and avoid sites that are completely trolled and that shut down any kind of discussion.
I'm not quite tracking the last part of what you said, Emily, yet, but the first part of what you said, I almost think that we're all what's been said so far by Paul and me, and I don't know where the rest of the board stands, but I think we're agreeing with you, maybe in different words.
Okay.
I'll let somebody else speak. I'm going to step back.
No, Virginia, I think your last line there, I think, was spot on. I mean, instead of, I think what Paul had said is, instead of sitting there and giving them, here's your goal and here's the outcome we're expecting to come out, Paul's basically saying it's all on the table. Let's put together a committee, have people volunteer. Emily, it sounds like you're passionate enough on this that you could be a Board of Selectmen rep and on the board and on this committee, and then everything's on the table. Where do they want to go with the committee, and what do they want to look at? And when we're done, did it accomplish everything that we heard in the listening session?
I guess the only thing I'd say to that, I don't know that we're gonna be done, as it were.
No, never.
No, well, I'm sure they're going to come back to the board and give us a report at some point.
Sure, yeah.
But
Yeah.
but you want to make sure that the boat is being, I don't want to say steered correctly, but you want the committee to be making headway and having results, and not just meeting just for the sake of meeting. You want to make sure they have the support and what they need so
Mhm.
that we have progress in this town to make the changes we need to make.
I think that what I would see this as is much like any kind of mission statement review or charter review committee, where it's going to form and dissolve as things come up and as you move forward. And when you see that you know, there's been like an ending, like a good terminus, that the committee can say, okay, well, we're done for now. Let's figure out where the next one needs to pick up. Because I don't think that this is something where we're just like, oh, we did it. It's got to be like a thing that is going to dissolve and come back. And like this is the sort of thing where you have to keep doing those deep checks and saying, are we still talking about the Vietnam War causing problems? Or have we actually reviewed what we're doing and thought about it in
Emily,
40 years?
I think you're exactly right. I agree with that. I mean, maybe that's a better way to frame what Ken was initially saying in terms of short-term, long-term. We don't necessarily know what long-term looks like, right? And so you, as the committee evolves, culture is a continuous thing. It doesn't end. And so I think you're right. There may be a terminus where this committee says we're done and here's where we recommend the next one picks up, or, but let's get the smart people together and let them start the conversation.
I think
The
you're
only
right.
reason why,
I'm sorry. I think you're right about the culture because, for a long time, the demographics in this town were basically the same. And then just maybe in the last 10 years, they seem to change just a little bit more and more, to be more diversified. And I think it's just people are adjusting to it. And I think some of them adjusting to it well. Maybe there are times when other people don't adjust as well. And maybe that's what has to be discussed. But I mean, to say that we're a certain way, it's just the way the town was. I mean, at one time the town was, when I was in high school, there was nothing but, there wasn't anybody but, Caucasian people in the school and in the town. And it's changed quite a bit since then. And I think people have adjusted to it fairly well. But
do you know, actually the lack of diversity in part comes because this was a sundown town. This was a town that was absolutely adamantly and openly against people of color being here. And so the reason why in the 50s and 60s it looked so white is because in the 30s and 40s they were busy like getting rid of everything and happily redlining themselves into whiteness. You have Black landowners, if you go back to the founding of the town, they're there in public records. You have Black farmers, you have them there until Reconstruction. And then with the rise of the KKK, they were taken out. So, I know a couple of minor historians that are trying to get access to the information, but the fact is that, we have a history of the KKK in this town. And part of the reason it was so very white for so long is because it was designed to be that way through zoning and planning and redlining. So it's
so one of the, Emily, not to cut you off, but one of the reasons why I just wanted to make this clear from the comment that was made previously was when I talked about short-term, long-term, I wasn't really thinking that every one of these could be pigeonholed into, this is a 2-year project, 3-year project, 4-year project. I think this is a lot going on, but I put a term on it because the one person who spoke that really had me worried was the young man who talked about being afraid to go outside because he was afraid of the police. And he said him and a couple of his friends. And to me, that's a real short-term problem that can be addressed in the short term very easily, I think. And I'd like to see that. I don't want to wait for a committee to come back in 6 months, and I would love to see that squared away pretty quick. I know the police in this town, obviously my son's one of them, and they would love to have all the kids in town come down because for two reasons, to meet the police officers and see what they're about and become friends. And because a lot of those kids can actually be a help later on down the road if something happens. But secondly, they're always looking for new members. They have a reserve. It's not a reserve. Maybe Paul can help me for the word of it, but they have like a young, I think it starts at age 16 where they bring kids in.
You're thinking of explorers, the police explorers they have in a lot of communities.
Right. And so they want to meet the kids and have them come in and see if it's a career they want to go into down the road. So, that to me, that's a short-term issue that can be tackled. And I'm worried. I don't think any kid should have to live afraid to go outside and shoot, basketball when a police car drives by.
But they are.
But the rest of it, yeah, I understand. And the rest of it should be addressed as we can do that. So that's the only reason why I started with short-term, long-term goals.
Thank you for that example. I found that comment heartbreaking, so I would fully support if there's anything that could be done in the near term.
All right, so from what I'm hearing, I'm assuming we're going to move now to talk about a committee. And are we all in agreement that we want to set up a committee?
Do you want to talk about that tonight, Ken, or do you want to write something down that we look at next week? Or
is there a way you could have some flexibility built into the committee so that you have almost like guest members or temporary members or something, so that the folks who want to come in and work on one particular short-term problem can bubble the committee up to like an extra few members? Like, how do you bring in people who are like, you know what, I'm going to let other people handle this thing, but I'm an expert in this topic because I know a bunch of stuff here and I want to work on that because that's what I'm really good at. But being part of a longer-term committee feels like too much commitment right now, especially because there's a pandemic on and who knows where my kids are going to be in 3 years. So, I think that if we need to figure out how to make this a more flexible and fluid group, so that maybe there's a core group of people that are dedicated to working through it, and then you have that space to pull in more as needed who can come and go with a bit more freedom. I don't know if that's possible.
I think the police have helped a lot with the PAL organization. They raise a lot of money for the youth activities, and they intertwine with a lot of them. They give money for different events, and they participate, and they get to meet a lot of the kids, and they're available for kids to meet them. And I think it's, that's where I would start or continue. I mean, I think they do a great job as it is, but you start with the youth, and I think that they do an excellent job. Just my opinion.
I think regarding regarding the committee, as far as what Emily said about having temporary members, obviously they can do that. I mean, we have committees now that do that. They have somebody come on for just a few months or for particular focus, but there's nothing that I don't think that would stop this committee from reaching out to have an advisory panel, if you want to call it something like that they could call upon for, particular expertise. Because I would imagine that the committee itself would be residents of Chelmsford, and some of these experts might be people from out of town, from universities, from other organizations. So maybe they wouldn't even want to be there even for 2 months for every meeting, but be available when something came up that they maybe had some thoughts and some actions that they could recommend to move forward to improve the situation in a particular area.
All right, so do you want to walk away and at the next meeting come back with some ideas on what the committee should look like? How many members? And maybe we can do a little research on other towns, what they've done, or and come back with our own ideas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That works for me.
Pat
Yep, that sounds fine.
and Emily?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So-
That was,
So Ken, is for next, you mean next week, or?
do you want to do it next week or you want to do it in 2 meetings?
I'm okay with either one, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to be.
I'm okay with either. Just tell me which date.
Yeah, no, I was thinking next week. I like
Okay.
homework assignments, so if you put it on, I'll get it done. So,
Okay.
all right. So we're done with 7. I can move on.
Yep.
So the next one was, I'll talk about this because I was the one that put it on the agenda. I was given a letter by the town of Rutland, and I've seen now several of these letters pop up. And the gist of it is that basically the MMA went and supported a bill, which is neither here nor there. It's that they did it without polling their municipal association and put out a statement in regards to that. And basically the letter just says, in the future, if this is going to happen, we would prefer you to poll it, the towns and the communities you represent. And I thought that was important because we have an organization that represents us taking a stand on something, and that someday may not go in our favor. This may not have been in our favor, or may have, I'm not sure, but it's just basically a letter to the MMA saying, in the future, we'd prefer if you could poll your organization before you make any type of statement like this.
What was the statement?
I have to get it open. It's in your agenda. Let me see if I can open it.
I'm gonna just read it so that folks know what it is.
Hold on. For some reason, it's not opening in my.
So while you're opening that, I just have, kind of some general thoughts about this. MMA is, it's an advocacy organization, and they have quite a few subcommittees, and I'm sure that this proposal that they came up with, or this favoring certain legislation, came from that committee, which usually does have, representation from across the state. I don't know that they've ever polled the entire membership, other than, I guess you could say, maybe during an MMA meeting when they have their annual meetings and they come up with these resolutions that they pass. And I'm sure that they're never going to please every community and every person in every community that they advocate for. On this topic in particular, I went back to the Beacon and I tried to find where they specifically favored one piece of legislation, and I didn't find that. I did find where they favored, there were 4 different topics that they thought should be sure to be covered in the legislation, which my understanding is there is no final legislation yet. So I guess I'm confused about, why we may be upset that they're being a proponent for some piece of legislation that isn't even finalized yet. And finally, I guess I would say that in general, I think they do take into account the feelings of all the municipalities that they do represent. If we as individuals or as a board agree with them or don't agree with them, we have the opportunity to say that. I would think that if we were going to send a letter to the MMA, I guess you could say chastising them for making this decision, or congratulating them for making this decision, I would think that would have to be a unanimous vote of the board. That's what I would like to see. Otherwise, like I said, I think it should be on an individual level.
Any other input? I have it open in front of me. I can read it. But does anybody else want to say anything before I go into this?
You could just summarize it. And
So basically, in the letter on July 16th or thereafter, through digital and print publications, the Massachusetts Municipal Association advocated publicly for both Massachusetts Senate and House versions of bills S 2800 and H 4860, respectively, aimed at sweeping police reform statewide. Where reconciliation of the Senate and House bills has not yet been broached, both bills included fundamental change to the civil service process, collective bargaining, labor management, and qualified immunity for officers. While the Rutland Select Board values the MMA, it is important to note that while purportedly acting as the voice for all cities and towns in Massachusetts, the town of Rutland was not consulted concerning this advocacy and has created division locally and had pitted law enforcement officers against municipal boards. On July 22nd, the Chief of Police Association publicly opposed House and Senate proposed bills. MMA's advocacy surrounding the legislation has caused some in the community, including the law enforcement officials, to believe that municipal leadership at a local level is at odds with its own policing. The town of Rutland Select Board has an excellent working relationship with the Rutland Police. All of our officers, first responders, and frontline staff have demonstrated exemplary service throughout the last several months, during which Massachusetts has lived through a pandemic, civil unrest, and virtual economic shutdown. The town of Rutland Select Board wishes to convey that we stand with our police department in solidarity during the unprecedented time and urge the MMA to work to ensure municipal leadership is polled statewide prior to advocacy that would fundamentally change its municipal operations.
I got one today from the town of Wilmington as well. And then if you looked in today's Little Sun, they had a big rally on the Common up in Westford. About 300 some people were up there supporting the police after last week when they had about 40 or 50 people against the police. And I mean, I think it's making it it's making the police feel like they're not wanted. And I mean, let's face it, we can't. I mean, I'm not saying the police don't make any mistakes or whatever. I mean, I'm not, but I'm just saying that we should all be behind it. Where we'd be. I had 2 incidents in my neighborhood this week. If it wasn't for the police and the fire department, we probably would have had 1 death, maybe 2, and some other serious damage. So, I mean, I'd like to give support to any of the public safety people, and in this case, it's the police.
But George, where this catches me is they're just urging the MA to work to ensure the municipal leadership is polled statewide prior to it advocating for something that would make fundamental changes to municipal operations. And that's the part that, you know, if the MMA is going to be out and about taking out ads and promoting a certain bill or law, I would just want to make sure that they're reaching out to the communities for feedback on that.
Well, I agree with you.
They did. Go ahead, Emily.
You know, you want to complain about mischaracterization of people. The protests have been against specific behaviors by specific factions that have protected the worst of the worst that humanity has to offer, under the worst impulses we have to offer. And we have set up systems that protect those worst impulses. So it's not blanket, against the police. Like, that hasn't happened. That has not happened. So
Emily,
the protest is against police brutality, against escaping justice, against getting paid administrative leave after shooting people who were peacefully sleeping in their own apartments. That is what the protests are against. They are not against the police. Okay. So no.
Emily and George, again, what I'm asking for here is, I understand, you know, what we're discussing, but the letter urges the MA to work to ensure municipal leadership is polled statewide prior to advocacy that would make any fundamental changes to municipal operations.
So you're kind of going where I was going. I'm not sure that, regardless of how I personally feel, I'm not sure I want to get into a position where they're asking the board to come to concurrence on the MMA is a lobbying organization. And this is the second time since I've been elected that they've gone off and lobbied in a way where they haven't gotten input from the municipalities. The other one that I recall is they made a decision to support Baker's push for a simple majority vote on rezoning And I don't ever recall being brought into the conversation on that. So I agree with sending a letter to the MMA that talks about what is your process when you're going to go advocate for something. And here's a couple of examples. And while it may be too cumbersome to get every board to vote on every advocacy, Pat, it would be very easy for them to implement even a poll, like Ken's suggesting, where they just poll members and we can respond as an individual member. Yes, I agree with it. No, I don't. And then at least they're getting a temperature check before they make a decision to go and lobby on something that's going to affect the operations of the town.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with, asking them to do that. In fact, they may even already have something like that. I believe they have like a listserv where they have particular issues, and you can obviously add your thoughts to that. I mean, just because, as you're right, they are a lobbying organization, and just because they might be lobbying for one side or another doesn't require us to then back that.
But should they not get at least some input, quick input, before they make a decision on what they're going to do?
I mean, I think they do.
It's on the table, and I'm short term on this, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, well, I mean, I can look at and see exactly where it is, but I know they do reach out. They have regional organizations of Board of Selectmen, but and then I guess I would say, at what level does it come to the point of what's the term that you use, Ken? Significant change or fundamental change in municipal operations? Who determines whether something meets that threshold? I mean, somebody could say Chapter 90 funding meets that threshold. I think it does, but there's so many things. So I think it would just be difficult to turn to say at a certain point, yes, you need to reach out to everybody before you can advocate one way or another on a particular issue.
So
And
I'm not sure where that leaves
if we
us.
choose to do this, this needs to be updated because, I mean, it's now in conference, I think.
Correct.
Like, we wouldn't be
And
voting on this letter. Something would have to be written. And again, I think that if we choose to do this, to me, the important message is the process. And how do they get the input from the municipalities before they make these kind of decisions?
If we did write
Paul,
it,
Ken, do you see, Rutland made a statement that this is putting elected boards and their police department at odds. Do you see that kind of division in Chelmsford?
Do I see that division in Chelmsford?
And I only ask because I haven't, but maybe there's something I'm not aware of.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say. Can I put it all to that? The answer is no.
Okay.
Can I say that the morale at the police department is probably at a significant low?
That's
But
fair.
there's a lot going on, so how do you figure, if they're usually running a 90%, on a fuel tank that's at 90%, and now they're running on a fuel tank that's down around 20, how much of the loss was, everything that's gone on in the country in the last 9 months, and how much was, not feeling like they're backed by their townspeople. I don't know how I would break that out, but yeah, I would think everything is at this point taking a toll on them.
Boston alone has 350 people have put in for retirement. I know there's a couple thousand members, but then others are another 100 are out on disability. So, I mean, I think people are getting scared. I think it depends. If the bill comes out the way it's written and it's approved, I think a lot of people are going to be afraid to even make an arrest, touch somebody, or whatever. I'm not an expert on it. I haven't read it that closely. Some things I have, but It takes a lot of their,
So there's two questions we're trying to answer. Do we take a stand on the bill, and do we take a stand on process in general? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I don't think you can take a stand in the bill, because my understanding is that it's already changed substantially from this. It's more the process.
Okay.
You know, for me, it's about if the MMA is going to be representing an association of towns, then how do they know that they're acting in the best interest of the towns? I mean, they meet. Pat, how many times a year does the MMA meet with its membership?
They have just that one annual meeting, but they do meet this
Right.
that meet several, probably monthly. And like I said, they have the policy subcommittees that they meet several times a year to come up with things that they feel that they should advocate for and not. So I mean, if you'd like, you know, for the next meeting, I could do some research and find out exactly how the process does work. Paul, yes.
Yeah, I think maybe the effort should instead be, why don't we send a request or an invitation to the MMA leadership and ask them or someone to attend one of your upcoming meetings and explain to the board and the community how they determine their advocacy. Rather than sending it a definitive statement, why don't we learn more about how they do it? And I think what you'll hear, having been around the organization for over 30 years, is that they have a local government advisory committee and they have an executive committee. But I think you should specifically ask them, how do they go on an issue like this? How do they determine a position in advocacy? And then if you're not satisfied, then I think you can then suggest that you may then consider sending a letter or going formally in writing in terms of a position of this Board of Selectmen. But I think the first thing is to have a conversation and a dialogue to obtain additional information. And you know, because I think as Virginia said, it's not just this one issue. It seems to be a question the board has in general in terms of how does the MMA advocate on behalf of its 351 cities and towns.
Pat, do I remember correctly in thinking that you might be more involved with this and are technical liaison to them, or was that, I know you're a liaison to NIMCOG, but how do those two overlap?
Not at all. Not at all.
Not at all. So does NIMCOG have any representation within MMA?
No.
Okay.
Or a regional planning organization.
Are they funded by our dues or some other way? Do we pay?
Yeah, cities and towns are assessed dues to the Mass Municipal Association. I think our dues are about $7,500 per year. It's determined by population, I believe.
So what does everybody think about Paul's recommendation?
I think that's a good idea.
George?
I don't know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with listening to them, but I mean, I don't care. We don't send it to them. We send it to the governor. Send it to somebody. We don't like the bill.
Did we make a decision that we don't like the bill?
If that's what we're going to do.
I don't think we're talking about the bill anymore, right?
No, I don't think so either. I also don't think the governor has anything.
Well,
to
I think
do
we
with
got off
MMA.
kilter because I think that's what started the whole conversation. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, but
We did start talking about the first letter that we all received from Charlton or whatever
from Rutland, right? But like, we're not going to comment on the bill. It's in committee. It's getting hashed out between the House and the Senate, so it doesn't look like what it did.
Senate passed it, and the House had added 80 amendments or something like that. It's just,
Right, so they're going through the amendments, and some of them were voted down by 3 of our 4 representatives who should not have. But like, there were some pretty sensible amendments in there that passed, and there were some pretty sensible amendments that got voted down. So I think if we're gonna go at that level and really look and see what our 4 reps are voting on, then I think that that's a whole nother ball of wax. That is an enormous amount of time and commitment. So I don't know if you want to do that or not, but there are a whole lot of bills out there where we could have had some progress, we could have had some good decisions, and 2 or even 3 of our reps voted in a way that didn't help progress. So, I mean, I don't know how often we want to dive in and look at, you know, how our reps are voting, how our senators voting. I don't know how often we want to go through the 5,000 bills a year that are put together and look at them all. It's not our job, and we're not paid for it.
Emily, let's stay on point.
I think.
What's that, George?
I think this is a little bit bigger than most because it's basically nationwide, and it's having an adverse effect on. Well, I mean, it seems like it's having an adverse effect on the whole country. And it's more political than anything. That's what it is.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's about the realities of people. It's about human beings and a system that is not functioning. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you fix the system? You look at it, you figure out ways to fix it, you propose some things, and you discuss it.
So let's do this, Paul or Pat, if you wouldn't mind, Pat, do a little research and we reach out and see if the leadership can come in and talk to us about how they pick and choose what they're supporting.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right. Is Mike McCall on? Is he going to give us a traffic update?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Traffic and Safety Committee met today. We went over many of the items that we had on our list that originated at last summer's listening session. We did spend some time talking about some of the recent emails that the committee has received. They've come in through the town manager's office. A lot have had to do with enforcement, brush trimming, and a recent note, some of the issues at some of the intersections in town. We did have some discussion about that. And what I just want to remind the board that the board does have its own traffic calming policy, which requires an investigation into any type of signalization or signage in some of these instances, specifically stop signs. And I know that Chief Spinney said he already had officers out looking at Proctor and Park, which came in. There was a request over in the Westlands for some stop signs. And of course, the intersection where the tragic accident occurred last week. But this takes some time. It's going to require ongoing enforcement, observation, looking at historical information at those intersections. There are some intersections that have more accidents than people would think. The one over in the Westlands at Stedman and Dalton. So although there are serious traffic accidents around town, that isn't always the defining or delineating factor for increasing signage. If that were the case, the street that I live on last year had 2 fatalities, and we have regular bad accidents at the corner in line of sight from my driveway right near where Selectman Crocker Timmons lives. And there hasn't been any major signage there. So those are being examined and will be continued to be reviewed. I wanted to just briefly go over some of the accomplishments that get overshadowed when we look at some of the bigger issues. As we all know, one of the highest priority issues has been to look at traffic relief from the heavy commercial vehicles up in the Ledge Road, Dunstable, Swain, and Main Street area. But there's been significant response to the requests that came out last year for enforcement, and those are ongoing actions. They've occurred along Bill Ricker Road near Golden Cove, on Main Street, Route 40, along Stedman Street, as well as general areas around the town, including in front of the fire station where we've had cars cutting around on the flashing red light. We've been responsive this season to the tree trimming requests at Pine Hill Road, Acton Road, Davis and Old Westford, and at Graniteville and School Street as well. The traffic calming measures are ongoing. DPW has been working on site locations. They hope to have something out by the end of this month in the Main Street area. They've targeted areas. They have to find a location that is big enough to accommodate the traffic calming, the barrels and the striping without interfering with any cross streets or driveways. So it's taken some time to locate specific areas. A lot of the issues that we've looked at are on hold for a variety of reasons, including COVID-19, believe it or not, plays into some of those issues. That because of the traffic studies that would normally be required for heavy commercial vehicle exclusions or to look at any type of signage, or even the requests that we take better steps to reroute prom traffic, have all fallen to fluctuating traffic patterns as a result of the quarantine and the various phases we've been going through. So some of the specific streets, such as over around Mill Road and Turnpike Road, Lieutenant Spence and I were planning to do some traffic monitoring over there. That has been placed on hold. Other issues have been placed on hold because we're waiting on responses from state agencies or other local agencies. As I said, the commercial vehicle exclusion that was discussed up around Ledge Road for the lower Dunstable Road, that's on hold. Stedman Street and Littleton Road, I've submitted paperwork to have them examine whether or not we could have an additional turning lane when you come off of Stedman facing Moonstone. Similarly, the Princeton Street at Cottage Row crosswalk, NIMCOG said there would have to be some extensive traffic studies there. Littleton Road, we're going to wait on the air quality studies for some of the asphalt related issues that came up during the listening session. And we're waiting on Mass DOT, who is doing a reevaluation of the speed limit along Route 110 relative to the complaints on asphalt trucks. Some of the items that were completed that came in, as you may recall, last fall, we got heavy commercial vehicle exclusions over in East Chelmsford around the UPS facility. There have been significant changes made to traffic signalization, which included in adjustments to the timing of the lights at Glen Ave and Route 110 in front of Market Basket, at Dalton and North Road, at North Road and Parkhurst. There were line of sight improvements made down in Mill Road at Turnpike. And as you know, there have been significant adjustments to the timing of the lights and signalization in Central Square, including Westford Street. The rapid flashing beacons were placed in at many of the crosswalks around the public schools, and there have been sidewalks repairs made in Central Square, and there were striping improvements where they were requested out by Mill Road and Elizabeth Road. There are a couple of items that have had no action to date. As the request for signage, we've had a request to limit or reduce some of the signage in Central Square, specifically around the Adams Library. We didn't address that yet. There were some requests to make improvements to Route 3 and 495 interchanges, but that's beyond the scope of what the town can do. And the hours of operation of the asphalt plants is really not something that we can touch. So what I've done, Mr. Chairman, after today's meeting, I have updated a spreadsheet that I had before, which maintains some of the priorities that we had previously placed on these items, as well as the status. And I'm going to be meeting with the interim assistant town manager in the next few days. I'm going to pass this over to him temporarily. And I've reached out to all of my contacts at NIMCOG, Mass DOT, and other agencies, and I have indicated that I will be transitioning out of the position and that they could send emails to the town manager's office and to Mr. Maffetone regarding the status of these projects and the delivery of any reports that will be collected going forward. I also neglected to mention I'm waiting on a response from the Archdiocese of Boston. We did have a medium priority request to look at increasing the lane width at Fletcher Street and North Road, and the property that would be needed is actually owned by the Archdiocese. It's part of the front of St. Mary's Church. So I did make a request a while back from the Archdiocese. I do ping them from time to time, but they haven't made or given me a formal response. But that is the status at the moment of the overwhelming majority of the issues that came up last summer. As I indicated, a lot of them get overshadowed by the volume of concerns that came out of the Ledge Road, Dunstable, Swing, and Main Street area. But the DPW, the police department, the fire department have been doing quite a commendable job in addressing these and the enforcement issues. And we will continue to address these issues as they come in, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody have any questions for Mike? No? And what about the air quality study request for proposal?
So after town meeting passed or approved the citizen article for the funding of the air quality studies, I did have a brief exchange of emails with Mr. Hall about any input he may have relative to how we would go about having these studies done. I did speak with representatives from Westford on the nature, quality, and quantity of their studies and the cost. And based on what I gathered from my investigation, pursuant to the procurement laws, I did not issue a formal RFP, but what I issued was what's known as a solicitation for quotes, because the dollar amount was not to exceed $50,000. I emailed directly 61 different organizations that hold themselves out on the Massachusetts procurement system, which is known as Combis, is specializing in air pollution study detection. I have had some inquiries from a couple of organizations, and they've indicated that they will be responding, and I've handled some a fair amount of questions of how they would set up. And I used the basis of the Westford reports, as well as some other communities, both inside and outside of Massachusetts, as the basis for the criteria that I put into a RFP-like document that was issued to these 61 different entities. And those responses are due back this coming Wednesday. I believe that might be the day that Mr. Maffetone is in. I will then take the most responsive and qualified bidders, and I will talk with the manager, and we'll look at the price and to determine which one is in the best interest of the town moving forward. And then we will report back to the board at the next meeting with whichever respondent satisfies that criteria and move forward with the testing. And the idea, Mr. Chairman, is to have the two sets of tests, one set of tests that would happen right now. I've indicated time is of the essence, so as soon as we can determine the most qualified respondent, that we would enter into an agreement and have them initiate that first set of tests while the asphalt plant is still up and operating at peak capacity. And then the same entity would perform a second set of tests, most likely in the fall or in the winter when the plants are not at peak capacity or otherwise closed. And then we would have baselines to look at going forward.
Okay, any questions for Mike on that?
So Mike, you said you modeled it after the Westford tests.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I'm asking is during the last Board of Health meeting, one of the participants said that you were writing an RFP to do testing on site, but my understanding was we were testing in Chelmsford at different areas outside the sites of the two asphalt plants.
Right. The way I worded it is the town would work with whoever is chosen to do the testing to help them determine sites. Some of the questions that I received already were relative to, does the town own land within the 1 mile radius of the respective facilities? And I did note that there is some open space. There are other town parcels that we might be able to utilize falling within that 1 mile radius of the two plants, and that there are some north, south, east. In the case of the one in Route 110 aggregate, we could get to the west of it. We couldn't do that up in North Chelmsford, as you know, because the plant is on the west side of the town line. But it would be left that the town would be part of the siting committee or siting process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the update, Mike. Paul, you want to talk about the bid manager, the bid awards?
Actually, I'm going to ask Michael on this one. He worked with the town clerk, Patricia Duras, on the procurement for the conservation of historic documents. So, Michael, you want to inform the board the results of what's transpired?
Mr. Manager, I don't have the bid award up in front of me, but what I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, after town meeting, I worked with town clerk Patricia Duras. She had put together the bulk of the RFP, working with town clerks in Lexington and maybe some other communities. And then I worked with her to take that draft and help tailor it for Chelmsford. We properly posted and distributed that pursuant to the procurement rules. We had 2 responsive bidders that came back, and the 2 had very similar price proposals, that they were not to exceed the $450,000 amount set by town meeting. But the Historic Preservation Document Committee, it's PIRAC, Preservation.
Northeast.
No, the committee that, the subcommittee, it's PIRAC. Public Records Advisory Committee. They sat down with the town clerk. There was a representative from the Historic Commission as well as John Souza on that. And they reviewed the criteria set forth in the RFP. And based on the price proposals as well as a technical proposal, they selected NEDCC, which the manager read the name. It's Northeast Document Conservation, is it?
Yeah, conservation.
And so the clerk and I have recommended to the manager, through the manager to you, Mr. Chairman, that you make the bid award in the amount not to exceed $450,000 to NEDCC, being the most responsive and advantageous bidder.
What made them the most advantageous?
Well, there was different styles. I did not sit in all of the review that was done by the Public Records Advisory Committee, but there were, my recollection is there were 2 distinct types of preservation. And I believe NEDCC was going to do more of a traditional rebind some of these older books. And the other committee, the other respondent was going to do a different type of restoration, including putting some of the documents in Mylar bindings, Mylar sleeves and 3-ring bindings. And my understanding is at the end of the day, looking at how the different techniques would be applied and looking at the references and the other work done within the Commonwealth, that the committee gave higher marks to NEDCC and recommended the award to them.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Probably want to go through the town manager reports.
I think we need a motion to accept that bid.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we got to award it. Sorry.
I was just waiting to see if there were any other comments. If not, I will make a motion to confirm the bid award for the conservation of historic documents to the NEDCC not to exceed $450,000 as presented. George, you're muted.
Yeah. Pete, can we unmute George?
I second.
George. We have a motion second. All in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thanks again, Mike. All right, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under my reports, the first one is the citizen petition warrant articles for fall annual town meeting. Last Monday was the deadline in the bylaws for the submission of citizen petition warrant articles. There were 4 citizen petition articles submitted. All were submitted by Paul Regazio of Technology Drive. They're basically almost sort of 2 sets. One is to transfer free cash to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy. One article specified $1 million. The other one was a sum of money. And then similarly, the other set was to transfer funds from the town's general stabilization fund to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy. One was for $1 million. The other one was for a sum of money. So all 4 of these articles will be placed on the warrant for the fall annual town meeting. And next week at your meeting, I will bring you the first draft warrant for the fall annual town meeting. The following meeting in 2 weeks, on the 31st of August, I'll bring you the second draft. And then finally, your subsequent meeting at that, the Monday after Labor Day, you're scheduled to sign the warrant for the fall annual town meeting. So basically, we have 4 citizen petition articles, which will all appear on the warrant. So we'll include that in the materials I present to you next week.
I think Mr. Regazio needs to work on his spelling of levy. I don't think that's the kind of levy that he's talking about.
No, that's the kind of levy where you drove the Chevy to the levee.
That's right, yeah.
Or riverbank, yes, but no, a tax levy is LEVY,
Right.
but it will go on the warrant as presented because we're required under the statute to present it. But when I make the motion, I will use the correct form of the word levy. So yes, we did notice that. The second item under my report, I'm pleased to inform you, is that the town has received a $90,000 grant from the administration for the Chelmsford Rail Trail Maintenance and Repair Project. So we got a $90,000 fiscal year 2020 Mass Trails grant. What this is used for is, believe it or not, the Chelmsford portion of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is now in its 11th year. And what's happened since the trail was constructed is there's been significant root incursion, which creates some bumpy areas, particularly near High Street and other areas. And so the Public Works Department went out and assessed the situation. And again, we submitted a grant application, and we're pleased to inform you that the amount has been funded, and we plan and hope to get this work done this fall. So that's great news for users of the rail trail. The second bit of good grant news is from the fire chief, Gary Ryan. Chief Ryan submitted an application to the Federal Emergency Management Agency in what's known as the Assistance to Firefighters grant, and pleased that he secured a grant award from the FEMA in the amount of $213,491.07. There's a required 10% local match, which means that the total project, which is roughly 21,000, obviously of the 213, 10%. So it's a $234,000 project, and this has to do with replacement of mobile and portable radios. And so this is great news, because if you may recall, we funded mobile and portable radios at the town meeting back in June. And so basically what this is going to do is this is going to free up over $200,000 of town monies that can be repurposed at a future town meeting under the capital plan. So again, we want to commend Chief Ryan for his efforts to secure the funding, for this effort, and again the 2019 Assistance to Firefighters grant. So it's a great results. And then the final action under my report is it goes back to the state budget process and also where things are in the Commonwealth. As the board's aware, and many may be aware, the Commonwealth has again adopted a second interim budget for the current fiscal year. First, there was a budget for 1 month, which brought it from July 1st to August 1st. they've now adopted a 3-month budget, which brings it to the end of October. However, at that same time, at the end of July, the administration announced that the governor had reached an agreement with the state legislative leaders to level fund municipal Chapter 70 educational aid and unrestricted general government aid for the current fiscal year, despite the fact that there still remains no clarity from Washington in terms of federal assistance to the state during the fallout from the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously there's no final fiscal year 21 state budget. And I think the purpose of that was the governor and the legislative leaders realized that cities and towns are beginning the school year and into the fiscal year, that they need some basis at which to plan, and also they need a basis at which to have tax rate approved. There are some communities that have their tax rate approved by October 1st because they're semi-annual billing communities, and then others are later in the fall, such as Chelmsford, which are quarterly billing communities. So as the board's aware, things are very much in flux in terms of whether schools are going to reopen, what will eventually come out of Washington in terms of aid for the state. So again, my suggestion would be is that after Labor Day, that we reconvene the school committee, the finance committee, and the Board of Selectmen in a virtual type of meeting, likely, and discuss how to proceed and whether to proceed at what time at fall town meeting regarding the town's operating and capital budget, as well as other items. So basically that's where things stand in terms of the budgetary process. It's obviously unprecedented to have a state 4-month budget, and it's obviously we're in an unprecedented times with the COVID situation. And again, there's so much in flux in terms of what's going to happen even within the next few weeks in terms of school opening and how that will take place and what that will entail in terms of resources, and again, what assistance, if any, will come ultimately from the state in Washington, and then obviously what's happening with the economy as this pandemic continues on. So that's my report for this evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the board members for listening.
Paul, are you suggesting by meeting before town meeting, are you going to be having some kind of placeholder on the warrant in case we have to do something?
Exactly. I will put a generic article on the list that I give you next week in the draft warrant that will have an article to possibly amend the operating budget, as well as an article for capital. And then I think as we approach the town meeting, we can sort of hopefully come to a consensus in terms of what actions, if any, are needed. And again, they're depending on how things are going forward, it's going to depend where resources may be needed. Obviously, the education one is a major one. Will they be running school buses? Will they need recess aids? Are they going to be in person? What will be happening and what resources would they need if they do open under the COVID requirements? And similarly, it just rolls out through the town. So, and also just the latest information we have in terms of what's happening to the economy in terms of, business closures, unemployment statistics, and so forth. I'm not suggesting we go on a spending spree in the fall. I almost think more the opposite. We need to continually reassess the situation and how we can operate through it, both in the short term, medium term, and long term, because the last thing we want to do is come back later in the fiscal year and have to do cuts. What the dreaded 9C cuts, which are provision of state law, which basically means dealing with shortfalls in state aid during the middle of a fiscal year after the tax rate is set by communities, which is what happened in fiscal year 2009. So again, there'll be a placeholder, and I think we just have our best judgment in terms of what to do, and particularly even in capital, because, for example, if schools are closed, are there some capital opportunities that we should take, particularly in the kitchen areas, that could be done during that time, much like we're doing with the senior center, And so again, those are the type of items, particularly with the low interest rates and perhaps a favorable bid climate, are there issues that of capital investments. And obviously we heard loud and clear in June the concerns about the roadway infrastructure. And maybe that discussion gets revisited as well. So yes, there will be placeholders. And as we said, the information is very fluid and likely continue to do so. So I'm not envisioning any expansion on the general government side in terms of employment. It's more of a question of, where are we in terms of resources? What are our demands and what should be our capital priorities going forward? And who knows what state of reopening or retrenchment we may be dealing with at that time that, again, will affect a lot of this.
All right, thank you, Paul. So that brings us to Selectmen Liaison Reports and Referrals. George, you want to go first?
Yeah, normally I don't have much, but tonight I got a little bit. First of all, I think it was Friday night, I think it was. There was a very, very bad and fatal accident at the corner of Graniteville Road and School Street. One of the drivers of one of the vehicles was dead on the scene, and it hit a truck, one of the DPW trucks, and the driver, Mr. Tyler, I forget his first name, truthfully, but he was in very, very bad shape. They were trying to med flight him into Boston, and the conditions were so bad that they couldn't med flight him, but they got him to Boston finally later in the night. They induced him into a coma, and the word is today, I'm hearing that he's coming along well, so I hope you can all keep him in your thoughts and prayers, and hopefully he can come through. He was in very bad condition as well. On another note, I lost a very close friend, Steve Flynn, a town meeting rep, a member of the senior advisory board for many years. He was a great proponent for the circuit breaker. He used to be he worked in Susan Fargo's office for about 10 years. And he was very excited this year because he got the circuit breaker money up to over $1 million for the town of Chelmsford. And he got it so that the town of Chelmsford would always have the most circuit breaker money for the seniors in the state, which was a big thing for him. So my condolences to his family, Eileen and his three kids. Great family. He was a great family man. Just an ordinary good guy, and he'd be missed. As I mentioned earlier, there were 2 incidents in my neighborhood this week. I'd like to congratulate the fire department, the police department, and the Trinity ambulance for their response time and the way they handled the situations. And thank goodness everything worked out well after a few days. And also, I'd like to wish Steve Maffetone good luck on coming aboard with the town. Thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, a few things. I'll start with Steve, Steve Flynn, since George talked so eloquently about him. The thing I'll remember most about him is what George mentioned. He was such a proponent of that senior circuit breaker. It's they should name it after him. They really should. He was so adamant about it. A reminder about the library that it's now open, partially open. They do take names when you come in case there's any issues that come up later and they need to get in touch with you. And they are disinfecting every 2 hours, so it's about as safe as any place in town you're gonna go, and there's still all the resources there that are available to everybody. I want to congratulate all the Chelmsford High graduates. They finally got their diplomas. It's about 2 months later than they normally would have, but they should all have them by now, and good luck to them on their, the next chapter in their lives. A note about voter registration. If you want to vote in the September 1st primary election, the last day to register is August 22nd. It's a little bit later than it had been. It was 20 days before. Now I guess it's like 10 days before, so you get a little bit extra time to register to vote. Want to wish Mike good luck. I know this is the last time we'll see him in this venue, so I'm sure you do well in your new position, and I'm sure we'll all be watching too to see what kind of news you make in your new town. And lastly, I want to ask again about I've mentioned it a couple of times. Maybe we could try an in-person meeting next week. The school committee I know has been doing it now for several weeks, and so have some other committees. Any thoughts about doing that?
Does this have to be an agenda item for us to talk about it?
That's just an administrative type thing. I wouldn't think so.
While you're muted.
That's the chairman's responsibility to post meetings. So it's within his purview as chair, as Pat just noted, where and when the board shall meet.
Well, I mean, I can ask everybody either now or separately, but until I get 100% consensus from everybody that they're comfortable, I don't really want to have an in-person meeting. If someone's not comfortable and doesn't mind the rest of us meeting and Zooming, I'm fine with that too, but I want the decision to be unanimous how we do this.
Well, the concern that I've brought up, Pat, to Ken is I don't want to meet in person if it starts putting undue risk on people who are either at risk or live with people who are at risk. And, I don't know everybody's personal situations. I happen to have 2 people in my household who are high-risk individuals. And I'd want to understand better what the protocols are for that room before we use it. And I'm still not, I've watched a couple of the in-person meetings. I don't know what advantage it provides other than the 6 or 7 of us being there in person, because the public still can't attend in person. That's my concern. I will go with whatever the majority of the board wants to do, but that was my feedback to Ken.
George, do you have any input?
Well, I've had a heavy cold for a while now. I don't know why. I can't shake it. And I wouldn't want to be responsible for somebody else getting sick or whatever. I don't think I have, my temperature's fine and everything, but I've had a pretty good cough, so whatever. Just giving you a heads up. I don't want to scare anybody.
Emily, could I ask for your input on a face-to-face meeting?
I've been working right along. I'm working in a significantly lower risk environment right now, so I am less of a chance of being a carrier, but it only takes one, but it depends on everyone else. It's hard to say. My mom has had a cold too that she hasn't been able to shake, so she hasn't been out to visit. And I'll just say father-in-law for lack of a better proper term, but he's really sick. He's just sick and sickly. And so it means that my kids can't see their grandmothers if we're too out of the bubble. I understand that there are definite limitations. Obviously, I have an upset 3-year-old because she needs to be cuddled to go to sleep, and I can't do that right now. So there are pros and cons to meeting in person or on Zoom.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done, Emily.
I don't know. There are pros and cons.
Paul, what's the requirement for people who do meet in that room? I noticed one meeting that was there in person, the board that was meeting like wore their masks the entire time. Another board that met took their masks off when they were speaking. Some of them did. Is there a protocol?
The state guidance, health regulations restrict the space to 8 people. You know, given the size of it's basically 8 people per 1,000 square feet. If you are properly social distanced, you're not required to wear a mask, but but the latest guidance that came out at the end of last week from the governor encourages people to wear a mask now, and any indoor gathering for people who are not from the same household. So I think what you would have there is you would have no more than 8, and you would have people wearing masks.
And are they so they're sanitizing the microphones in that room in addition to the furniture?
Yes, that's my understanding, is that the room is being sanitized. So that would be the requirements for the use of that, as for that space.
Thank you.
So I would probably not be inclined to go back to a face-to-face meeting until we have I'm fine with it, but I want a comfort level by all the board members. I don't have a problem with the Zoom meetings either. But until I get, a majority vote, or at least 4/5 majority vote to do it, I don't think it's something I'm going to push to go to.
Okay, I don't feel comfortable doing Zoom meetings. I think you really do lose a lot about the interaction between, even if it is just the members of the board that are there. But you're the one, I guess, to make that decision.
All right. Well, I'll give it a little more thought, Pat, and we'll go from there. So liaisons, who were you with at that point? Is that you, Pat, that brought that up?
Yes, that was me.
Okay. So, all right. So George went, Pat went. Emily, do you have any liaison reports?
Yeah, I caught a chunk of the school committee meeting. I was trying to cook dinner and eat it while coming up for that. But they're looking at, I guess they did a survey and got over 80% response, which is amazing. And about 1 in 3 families don't want to go back to school until it's much safer. So they're looking at possibly then splitting the remaining 2/3 into 2 groups. So you've got like an A cohort and a B cohort, and they're all going to school part-time, so that you won't have too many desks in a room and too many people there at once. There are so many levels to how this is working. They're trying a lot of stuff. I'm actually kind of curious about the physical plant inventory and whether or not we've put like extra filtration into the HVAC systems, or how that's working, because I've never been in a school with fully functional HVAC and windows and access to fresh air, and I've just never seen one that wasn't like state of the art universities. So I don't know what the actual state of the physical plant of the schools is right now, and whether or not we've added any precautionary measures or checked on things, even like windows functioning. I know some buildings have those 70s plexiglass windows that don't open except in the labs, so I guess it all depends.
Okay, and that's your liaison, Virginia.
Just a couple things. Just a reminder that the planning board is having its 3rd session in its public hearing on the historic preservation bylaw. So if you do have any input, please review that material from their agenda and join them on the 12th. The Finance Committee is going to be meeting at 7:30 p.m. this Thursday, August 13th, to review the special town meeting warrant for the purchase of the Warren Pole Farm. And from the Conservation Commission, the DPW is installing a fire gate for the Russell Mill Reservation. And with that, 2 extraction points will be established for rescue workers. And the DPW is also going to remove trees at the Cranberry Bog.
Okay, thank you, Virginia.
Yeah.
So for me, the Master Plan Committee is meeting Thursday night, 7 o'clock virtually, and you can attend that by going online and connecting via Zoom. Mike, good luck. Your next endeavor. As on your way out, I'm going to ask, maybe as an agenda item on our next meeting. I'm not really sure how we left the Route 40 discussion and what sort of the plan was there. So on maybe next week we can circle back around on that and have a discussion on that. And then on a total separate note, over the last couple meetings, we've had this discussion about the assistant town manager and the interim position, and we've had a discussion about, Paul had asked about the October deadline, and I've been approached by several people in town who are town meeting reps and other people, and they're asking me about what we're doing as far as a town manager search committee. So maybe we can also address that at our next meeting. So we'll go from there. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add. Is anybody else? Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Virginia? George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you, everybody, and good luck, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Thank you.